when you look at how people buy, like their buying trends and their consumer trends with produce, it almost follows suit to how they're going to buy it for cannabis because it's something that they're putting in their body. So they're going to want to follow the same trends. And so if people are already buying tomatoes, buying their eggs, buying their lettuce and their fruit at a farmer's market, they're going to connect with the growers who are providing them with their cannabis. It's the same.
Total natural connection. I mean, if there's enough for three,
Yeah.
Three honey guys and three soap guys, there's certainly enough room, and people certainly would want the design. I would. I mean, if I could go to the farmer's market and pick up all that in one spot, you would do it, right? Like that's dope. I'm really glad to hear NYC going that route. I know we have a mutual person we know there, Aaron Raskin. He's always talking about how different and crazy it is.
Lobos, baby. Lobos.
Right? Yeah, Lobo all day, baby. Lobo for life, we like to say. Aaron will be on the show after you. So, he's lined up and ready to rock. We love that part of it, everything he's doing for sure. So, Damian, as we sort of wrap this up, I don't know if you turned me on to it, but the vertical growing, right? The indoor vertical growing. I think you turned me on to an article from a group of people, I want to say in like Wyoming. It was a super cold place where they just began this like vertical indoor grow. Is that something you're seeing in these harsher climates where people aren't able to necessarily, or maybe it doesn't make sense to do greenhouse, to get into that vertical grow, to do more of that here in our cold states?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it goes back to being able to have a localized production system, whether it be cannabis or, we also see an increase of like strawberry crops coming indoors, right? And so crops that require certain seasonalities and that now you can bring them indoors and grow them year round, right? You're no longer constricted to something that grows only in Southern California in the summertime, right? And so now you're able to produce and offer those products to your local consumers. And so one way of doing that is obviously going into an indoor growing situation. And in either capacity, whether it's a greenhouse situation or an indoor situation, you need to supply the same type of inputs, right? In the greenhouse situation, you still need light, but it comes from the sun. In an indoor situation, you're going to be sole source lighting through a lighting source like a fixture, an LED fixture, an HID fixture. But the plant still needs to get light. So how you deliver those inputs changes slightly, but it doesn't omit the fact that the plant still needs light. It still needs, proper temperature. So there's just slightly varying levels of equipment and technology to deliver that. But what's more important is that you're able to, get a year-round production system. And I think when you're building brands and you're trying to support that brand and you have a certain brand promise behind it, you want to make sure that your product is also consistent and repeatable, because then the consumer's experience is going to be consistent and repeatable. And if you can give them what they want 100% of the time that they want it, they're not going to go to the competitor. And so at the basis of a successful business is that's what you have to do.
And you know that because that's how you run your business. That's how you run the King. Is Correct. That you're there, you supply consistent, always on results. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand about businesses in general, is that it's about consistency. That's what I tell people. That's why we've been able to run our business in a humongous space like automotive for a decade, is because we're consistent. We do the exact same thing every single time we set out to do it. That way we know it gets done the exact same way. The way you talk about process, it's so easy to say to people, do a process, but you know better than most people from consulting in your role, you can lead these people all the way down the path to the water, but there is in no way can you make them drink or even follow along. And I got to imagine, like when I used to consult at large scale for huge dealers, it'd be frustrating when you'd spend your time, you'd give your input, you'd do it, and then you'd watch the end result. Is that something that you deal with in the cannabis space, or is that just something the rest of us deal with in the consulting world, Damien?
No. I mean, it's something that you're going to see everywhere. It doesn't matter if we're, talking about cutting 2x4s in a mill or producing ice cream. It's going to always still be that same thing. You have to deal with a lot of people's egos and a lot of different type of character types. And so how you present the information is going to be very important, right? And so one of the things that we see is you don't want to step on toes and kind of rub people the wrong way. So my approach is always going to be the business first approach. It's like, okay, by making these changes, you're going to see these effects happen on the bottom line, and the numbers won't lie. Regardless of what your opinion is, regardless if you think that your design was the best design, and you don't want to admit that there's problems, we're not talking about that. We're saying you guys are here at this point. You want to get to here at this point. These are the changes that need to happen to get us there. And a lot of times it's like small changes, right? You can go in, and a lot of the low-hanging fruit is going to be process driven. So you can show them small tweaks in the process. I like to always have growers do trials. I'm like, look, I understand you guys are set in your ways and you guys have a set routine, but let's take this area over here. Let's take 10 plants, 15 plants, 20 plants. Let's incorporate the changes that I'm talking about one at a time, and let's evaluate the results. If you guys like what you see, then we take the next step, right? And so it's just very like, it's just my approach to people. I try to work with all types of groups, and finding, that as you try to balance the different personalities, it's really about how does it affect the business at the end of the day, and how to set it up in a way that is going to ensure the survivability of that business, the sustainability of that business, because we're not talking about just building a business today. We're talking about building a business that's going to be here in 30 to 40 years.
Yeah, you got to have a much longer view of most of the main things and the bigger size scale projects that you take on, for sure. Damian, we've talked a lot about your origin story. I've got to ask my questions. The best part of this show for me is being able to let you guys, the people in the space living it, sort of bring up what it is that you're passionate about in the moment, what you think people need to hear about it. So the time has come, Damian. What is burning inside you want people to know about right now?
Oh man, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, I have my hands in a lot of different cookie jars, and so, I like I mentioned earlier, I'm not just solely working on cannabis. I'm doing a lot of food crops where we're integrating certain technologies, high image camera systems with autonomous learning systems, computer learning systems, being able to use more automation to allow us to do more. And again, it's not to where we don't want to have people who don't love the plant, growing the plant, whether it be food or cannabis, but it's about giving them the tools to be able to do it faster and bigger and better. And so, that's one of the things that I work with a couple groups, notably with Ayunu, and they're a company that's doing digital camera imaging systems, and control software in both food crops and cannabis crops. And so you get that nice crossover, and just being able to push the envelope. I've always been an innovative person. I like being involved in innovative projects and things that are going to shake and move and kind of shape the industry. And it's all with, being able to produce the highest quality product at the lowest cost point for the producer, and at the best cost point for the consumer, so that everybody has access to just better products.
So David, are you saying that this is like AI? Are we, when you talk about the efficiencies of automation and all of this, is that so? Because obviously that's a huge buzzword right now. Everywhere you look, everywhere you see, is that what you're referring to? Because I'm not normally intrigued by anything AI driven, but if you're talking about it now, all of a sudden I'm interested. So is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about using like AI based or computer based learning systems where with this digital camera you can scan the surface of the plant, right? And you can see all kinds of stuff. You can build a 3D model of the plant in real time, and then through the computer simulation modeling, you can simulate different scenarios in a blink of an eye and pick the best route, and then now deploy that in real time before you ever see any economic loss in the plant. Now, an interesting point to it is you can also detect anomalies like in temperature and gas exchange, and maybe like just the cellular structure. You can determine if there's been damage to the cells on the leaf surface, or if it's been attacked by an insect. So now you can detect this anomaly. You can do an alert to the growing team. They can come and check on it and fix it before it ever becomes a problem. So you can catch and detect issues weeks and weeks and weeks before it becomes a big problem. So again, that's another tool to allow growers to do a better job. And usually when you do a better job, it's at a lower cost point for production, right? You can produce it for cheaper, and you're going to produce more consistency and high quality in the back end. So I think it's a win-win all around. And so these systems then take this camera, this image, and at some point you have to train the camera to see what it's seeing, right? So they'll go in and they'll say, okay, this is drought stress or this is insect damage. And then you start to train the computer. So now every time it captures that same image or detects that same image in the future, it knows now what category to put it in. So then you can either do different types of alerts, whether you still just alert the growing team, or now that creates an autonomous control point that gets fed through the system. And then it says, okay, if this block over here is showing drought stress, it means I have to water. So now I'm going to irrigate that area. So, just being able to do things faster and sooner than a human eye can detect.
Yeah, I mean, does that modeling take you all the way out to yield? Damian, are you able to get that far into it to say, all right, this plant today is X inches tall and we'll model it out. If conditions stay the same, I'm about to get this much yield?
Yes. And through the use of that 3D modeling, because it can do what we call digital twin. So as these camera systems scan the plant, it knows the height and the depth of the plant, and so you can follow the growth of the plant, develop a digital twin of it. So you see the physical size of the plant in real time. So you can scan the different rooms, like if you're trying to determine when to harvest, or how much you're going to harvest, so that you can tell your downstream manufacturing and processing team what to expect. Now they can plan and they can be smarter, right? They can do smarter planning and just be more lean on their processes if you can say exactly how many pounds of biomass you're going to be sending them.
Yeah, I mean, from a business perspective, the ability it gives you to plan is almost worth whatever it is you got to pay up front to have it or monthly to maintain it, only because, again, being in the business world my whole life, that's what I focus on, is businesses, helping businesses. That's a big, that's a huge efficiency. Like, that sounds insane. I mean, look, I thought I was a nerd by using a microscope, trying to make sure I had the right day to pick. All right. Like, that was as geeky as I thought one could become. Then I start following a guy like you. I figure out I'm not even anywhere near a geek. But now I hear something like this and I think, my goodness, where are you seeing this implemented right now? Or where have you tested it? Like, at what size scale? I'm just really interested to learn more about kind of where you're testing this kind of a product.
Yeah, so as of last year, and I'm sure it's increased a lot this year, as of last year, Ayunu stated that they had scanned more than 1 billion square feet of canopy space, and that would include food crops and cannabis crops. So you can imagine the amount of data that you would get if you scan every 30 minutes, right? And so there's just large amounts of data out there. And it's just getting smarter and smarter every crop. And I'll give you an example, right? And we're talking about cannabis, but I think these technologies also work in food crops, because you're allowed to gain efficiency over anything that you're growing. So there's lettuce companies. Most lettuce crops are like 28 to 35 day crop, right? So very fast growth times. So some lettuce companies will have like 15% variance depending on like this where they're at, but they'll have a 15% variance uniformity of the product at the end. So they look for like a 250 to 300 gram head of lettuce at sale, but they have that, they kind of fluctuate. So we looked at one company where they said, okay, the conditions are the same in every zone, yet we have this 15% variance and it moves from zone to zone, so we can't really figure out what is causing it. And I said, well, let's look at, because it is a fast growing crop or a short crop cycle, realistically, what happens before you put it into the production zone, right? That's the propagation. So you sow the seed, you grow it for a few days, a week or so, and then you move it into the production space. So he said, let's look at how you're doing your plant selections. How do you select what plant goes from a seedling into the production space. And they said, oh, we just see if it's germinated. But when you start to get down and drill down into the micro level, the micro detail, if you have a plant that's only growing for 35 days and within you have a variance of 2 to 3 days between seeds of germination, that means you have up to a 10% automatic variance already built in with it at the start, right? So you're already starting behind, and it's difficult to catch up because the inputs are the same. So the plant's going to grow pretty much the same, but if one starts out 3 days ahead, the one that's behind is never going to catch up. So we use this camera system to scan the leaf surface area of the seedlings at emergence, and then you're able to detect where, you're able to pick out which ones were what. So then that can send a signal to a sorting machine or sorting robot. So now you can sort and select all of your lettuce seedlings to have the same surface area of their leaf, to ensure that you can say, okay, I only want seedlings that have a minimum of X surface area to go into the production space, and the other ones stay an extra day and they get scanned the next day. So you're able to select plants based on the physical size of the plant at a very small size, and you're able to then go and reduce your loss by 1 to 2% only. So we're able to, and again, if this happens in a food crop, if you're able to gain a 10+% efficiency by incorporating a technology in a food crop which has small margins, imagine implications on something much larger like cannabis or saffron or some other crop, right? So it's
I think of the guys at Glass House, like immediately. I'm just like, okay, so if I had like millions of miles of glass and just growing weed everywhere, wouldn't I want to know? I mean, just thinking about you being able to say to a machine, hey, not those, because the surface level, based on our modeling, that surface level is going to come out to a plant that's only 230 grams, and we're trying to be at 250 to 350. So to know that modeling is humongous. I don't need to get into the details of costs, but you worked with this with a lettuce provider. Is the cost, was it a lot when they first heard about it? Was there pushback? Because I mean, again, in my industry, when people bring in new tech, it's expensive and people are always like, the expense. Do you fight something like that in a situation like this being so new and emergent?
You can, but I mean, I think the benefit that you have or that we have is that we're working with growers who are already in somewhat of a high-tech situation. And then they're looking to just find ways to optimize, right? So the basics are already covered. And then now they're just looking for those extra percents. And so typically in a high-tech situation, the operation has already had expensive levels of infrastructure in place.
More like your 3.0, like you've been talking about then. Like that's like the people that are already in the next level. For them, it's not about gaining another 20%. It's about finding that 8 to 10 to just really hammer it out and clean it up. From this perspective, Damian, is there still more work that this will be able to continue to evolve and understand from this crop? Or is the seedling part figured out and now it maximizes the middle grow or insects or anything like that? Does it go back and relearn and try to get better there? Or is it sort of an established, wow, we've already got the sorting part, we're good there?
Yeah, I mean, and you can use the tech in many different ways. So you can use it as a plant selection tool. So you can just say, okay, I only want it to operate within these parameters, and all day long it's just going to do that. Or you can then incorporate it into like the harvesting schedule to say, physically scan the head of lettuce, and anything that's this size gets harvested today. So I think you can use that in different scenarios along the entire growth cycle to just use it as a selection tool. And again, it's to the point where it can be more exact than a human eye, right? You can tell people, pick 2 heads of lettuce that you think are the same, and you weigh them out, and there's going to be some small variances. But again, those small variances can come at the tune of millions of dollars a year, right? And so that's what you're trying to capture.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible to think that AI has made its way successfully into there. Damian, can you spell that company's name one more time? I want to make sure we get it right down here.
Oh yeah, it's IUNU. So it's IUNU.com.
CannaBizConversations.com. All right, cool, man. That's awesome. I look forward to learning more and highlighting that part of the discussion. When you've been really generous with your time, so I want to kind of, take this and wrap it up a little bit for us here. But as you look towards the future of the cannabis space, what are you most excited about? What has got you, I'm going to say, aside from technology, because I see you light up when we talk about this AI, but from that perspective, where you sit in this space, what excites you about where we're headed here?
I think there's a lot of things, right? I think it's just I'm just going to say maturation and a professionalism of the industry at a global level. I think when you look at and you compare it to other horticultural and agricultural crops and products, we still have a lot of room to grow in cannabis, right? And one area I think is genetics and just really understanding how to use, and I'm not talking about genetic modification, right? We wouldn't want to do that, but you can utilize some of the same equipment and tools to accelerate the breeding practices, right? So that we can get to that final product with those selected characteristics. So like finding something that can help against powdery mildew, right? Let's find what codes, what genes in the sequence code for disease suppression or disease resistance, and start to work that in through traditional breeding techniques into our cultivars, right? And where I think we're going to see where I want to see the industry and where it will go is that in the future, for commercial crops, it's going to be a true to type hybridized seed that is an autoflower, much like most other commercial vegetable production and things like that, right? A farmer comes in, they plant 50 acres of seed, 75 days later, they come and harvest.
I mean, yeah, dude, I live in Wisconsin. I mean, I watch it every day. I have a couple of nephews in the horticultural world. They're like, look, we have some of the best soil in the world here. It's such a shame that we can't grow cannabis in it, because watch what we're able to do with, corn or bean or whatever it is. And you're right. It is something that's set down. It doesn't even look like it's happening. And all right, dude, I gotta ask you, how does it get so straight in the line, Damian? What am I missing? Because I watched this spreader machine lay these things, and then I see how it grows. How does it do that? Is it just how it gets spread out? Like, is that just the machine itself?
Yeah, it's just the machine itself. You can set the density and how many seeds per acre and kind of the row spacing, and you set that all in there and the machines just do it, right? And I get when we start to talk about this stuff, people are like, oh well, we want to grow natural weed. You're still talking about growing natural weed. It's not a genetically modified thing. It's just being able to identify those key characteristics very quickly and incorporate them into your final product, so you're reducing the amount of time it gets to that final product, right? And there's always going to still be a need for niche markets, like maybe the local farmers market, where you have boutique and craft entities that are still producing weed through clonal cuttings. It's going to happen, or through being able to just take feminized seed and do it that way. But I think the idea is just to find ways to scale up to a point where we're at par with the rest of commercial agriculture.
Yeah, that's it right there. Because again, you talk about how to cutting the cycle, getting things down, being more efficient. That is a word that I think I've circled in my notes probably 10 times today, because you do go back to it, and because I think it is the most important part. Damian, man, thanks a lot. You have been a plant geek. I don't even know that sums it up. You're just like a plant wizard, dude. I love talking to you. I could talk to you about this shit all day. Hope you come back on the show here as we start to establish who we are, what we're doing in the space. Hope to someday be able to share one of those beautiful joints you seem to have with you in every facet of your life. I absolutely love it, man. Thanks a lot for joining us, and keep doing what you're doing. The industry needs it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, man. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. We look forward to you joining us next week. More great cannabis people. But don't forget, as we close out the show, like our man Dustin says, the goal here is to be able to work together to educate and put this plant in its rightful place in society. So thank you all so much for joining. Have yourselves a wonderful week.